Hey everybody, and today we're here to talk about Age of Wonders 4, and in particular we're here to talk about the Empire development track. This is something that a lot of you guys have been requesting, and I decided to go over it today, this morning, because I didn't do it in the previous days because I was lazy. So I'm doing it this morning. So for this one, we're probably going to keep this a lot shorter. I don't imagine this to be longer than an hour. Because realistically speaking, there's only so much information to cover. Each of these just buff one thing, and it's pretty easy to tell you if it's good or if it's bad. In particular, if you've watched my other videos, you're going to be, kind of noticing a lot of recurring concepts. Knowledge is better than food. Food isn't really that good, etc., etc., etc. And so because of that, I'm going to be spending a lot of less time here. In addition to that, well, there's only so much I can do to kind of make this visually interesting. I always tell you guys that you can use this as a podcast, or put me on your second monitor, or put me on your TV while you're on your phones. You can do stuff like that because I just try to talk throughout it and keep things interesting. But this one in particular, there's just not a lot of visual stimulation I can use to help out here. So, we're going to try to keep it a little bit less long. So here we are talking about the Empire Affinity track. And before I go any further, I of course have to do the introduction things. So make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to leave a comment down below. I do read all the comments. One comment in particular I did like. Somebody said, by watching your videos, you really helped me understand a lot of the different concepts in this game. And that's generally what I'm trying to go for here, is I'm trying to allow you guys to understand a lot of these different concepts so you can make your own builds, you can make your own decisions. So if balance patches or things happen in the future, that you can still use these videos and, keep things up to date with that. Kitty is meowing for me to open the window, but if I open the window, she's going to run away because she only wants me to open the window because the window is closed. And now she's annoyed at that. She's a Siamese. If I look at her, she will, of course, meow at me more. Where is I going with this? So I do like that comment, and I do like how anyone would ever think that, because that's kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make these very descriptive, and I'm trying to I guess describe things in an efficient enough way that you guys can come up with these videos with enough information. So that's about that. From here on, I think there's only a few more videos I have to make, but let's start. So depending on how much affinity you have, that's how much you fill out your affinity chart each turn. Each turn you get a certain amount of points going into the affinity chart. You get your affinity from society traits, from which culture you decided to go with, from your tomes. Dragons give some. There's some things you can do in game. Generally, that's what you do. Now, unlike other videos I've done where I've said this is a discussion and a tier list video, right? This one, the tier list will actually be pretty useful because there's pretty obviously better and worse affinities. I haven't actually written it. I'm kind of using this to refresh myself because which ones are the best are pretty obvious. But after that, it can get a bit more ambiguous. So I also kind of need to make sure that there weren't any patches or anything like that. That's also one thing I really want to talk about. In some of my videos, I've talked about some issues with the game. The developers have seemed really receptive to that. The multiplayer community as a whole seems to be very anti-developer. Me personally, look, go back 15 years and I would be with them yelling at developers, calling them idiots, blah, 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 blah. In my old age, let's call it that, 35, which is very old for a gamer, I've kind of learned that it doesn't really do you any good. And these developers in particular kind of do seem receptive to some issues. They have their own ideas for how the game should play out. The multiplayer community has their ideas for the game should play out. And the two don't really override each other, right? I don't think these developers are particularly bad at anything. And to give you an example of this, just this morning, they did a hotfix patch for the beta, wherein the Umbral Mistresses, and I guess I could double check this just to show you guys. The Umbral Mistress was, of course, toned down again in the beta. So the Umbral Mistress did not get the mythic buff and got her movement speed nerfed. So whereas other mythic units all got buffed across the board in the beta, Umbral Mistress got that reverted. And that was one thing that I was saying in my last video was a really big issue. So there's a... The developers are doing good work. And I think, is the one I always use is like EU4 in Hearts of Iron in their heyday, right? They were putting out DLC every 3 months. They were doing so much work. They were doing so many patches. They were not, a lot of them didn't really seem to actually understand how the game worked fundamentally, and they got made fun of a lot for it. But you can see the player count was going nothing but up. These developers, I think their content is a little slow. If I had one complaint for them, I think that they could maybe try to ramp up the amount of DLC they put out. Alternatively, they could try to rework some older concepts in between DLC launches. Like try to go back and maybe try to do like one tome rework every month or so, just to try to keep things stimulating. But I do think that they add, and I'm trying to say all this because I do think that this game is interesting. Sorry if you guys don't like this, right? But I do think this game is interesting, and I do think developers are doing a good job. Some people hear me complaining about concepts, things like that. That's just how I am. The more you'll watch me, the more you'll see that. I point out flaws more than I point out positives. And I'm trying to, at the very least at this point, say that, yeah, there are a lot of positives for this game. And I do think that the developers, even when we look at like things like tomes, right? I don't know why I'm looking at it here. I can't stop myself at this point. When we look at tomes like Tomes of Severing, they have added tomes that try to counter meta strategies, that try to change things up. Even in multiplayer, some people say that they don't focus on multiplayer, and obviously I don't think the majority of their focus is on multiplayer, but even with that in mind, they do add things that they do try to split up the multiplayer meta and keep things interesting. And what I'm trying to say here is I think this game does have legs, and I think the developers have probably gotten some a lot of help because the player base has grown considerably since it went on their free weekend, and I think they should try to keep that momentum going. If there was any time to give it like 110%, so to speak, this is it, right? So let's go through the affinity. Okay, let's start with what I would think most people consider your worst affinity, Chaos Affinity. So I mentioned earlier you get a certain amount of affinity increase per turn. So right now you can see I have 4 and 2, so I get 4 Order Affinity per turn and 2 Nature Affinity per turn. That means that you need to get a certain amount to unlock these different thresholds. So this one would be 15 Chaos Affinity, this one would be 120, and this would be 500. Some people do say that the late game affinity takes a bit too long to get to. I think I would overall kind of agree with that one, playing this game a lot. Unless you go completely ham into one affinity type, you can't really reach the end. This kind of makes going rainbow a bit too effective. Some people complain that a lot of times in multiplayer games, or in my builds in particular, that I'll just be going rainbow lately. In my older VODs, and as I do make each of these videos, I do get better and better and better at the game. But in my older VODs, I focus primarily on one affinity. In my newer ones, I kind of went rainbow a lot, just getting 3 enchantments in a row, like lightning blades, blight blades, fire blades, whatever it's called. You know, just getting 3 tier 1 tomes of damage enchantments and going rainbow. A lot of people have said, like, isn't that unthematic or blah, blah, blah. But the problem is, and let me explain real up front here. Here's the problem with this Empire Affinity thing. This one takes 15, this one takes 40, this one takes 60, this one takes 100, this one takes 120, this one takes 160, this one takes 200. Now, do notice these numbers here. So 200 affinity throughout the course of a game, and games do end. This game does have end conditions, right? Like, this isn't a Civilization game. We're not playing to turn 200, right? I haven't had a single multiplayer game go longer than a turn 108. And really in single player, they really shouldn't be taking you much longer than that anyway, right? And that would be considered a longer game, because once you're blown out and once the enemy is rampaging through your lands, like, that's the end, right? So here's 200 affinity, and then here's 500 affinity. So you can get all this from merely generating 200 affinity throughout a game, or you can get all this from only generating 120 affinity in a game, but you need to go hard into chaos, and you need to really put all your points into chaos to reach the end here. And for a lot of people, these end things are just not really that good, and they're not really worth it, with the exception of a couple of them. So, another thing you guys need to note, your first 400 affinity will very likely be going into setting up your first 2 cities to getting to 3 cities. So, on turn 6, you'll have enough affinity to set up your first city, and on turn 11 you'll have enough affinity to set up your second city. It's only after that that you can generally start setting up affinity into actually getting into these, but even that isn't true. Some people don't know that this is repeatable. it says it's repeatable, but for some reason people don't know it. So in this build in particular, I already started with the first one, so I have 4 cities. This is an older build. You might recognize this from my previous video, which I was using to look at the things. But at any rate, you can see here, it would be 200 affinity, then 500, then 800. So it's not even that a lot of these are competing against creating a city. A city will always beat them, but they're also competing against getting your 4th city. Only really your 5th city, I would say your 5th city is definitely doable, because your 2nd and 3rd city are 200 Imperium, your 4th city is 400 Imperium, and your 5th city is 700 Imperium. So when you look at it from that, most of these can't really even compete with getting your 4th city up. Most of them will beat getting your 5th city, but even then, most of them actually won't beat that, now that I think about it. Most of them will probably beat getting your 6th city up, but even then, some of them won't beat that. So with that in mind, what you also need to consider is none of these can really impact you until the middle of the teens in turns, like until turn 15, 16, because it's only then that you're going to generate enough Imperium to actually start obtaining these. There are some builds that can start with more Imperium generation, such as Signs of Evil, Signs of Good, whatever it's called, Bringers of Justice or something. I don't remember its name off the top of my head, but generally speaking, you're just not going to generate enough Imperium that you would just want to be throwing it away on these. Especially, you can use Imperium for some other tasks, such as re-rolling your hero, which if you re-roll your main lord, you might be able to change him into a counter build, and it will cost like 1,100 Imperium, but if you have that lord in a counter build to which faction you're fighting, that might be more powerful than picking up a lot of these weaker things. So keep all this in mind. When I started this game, I didn't really like the idea of making the end track 400 instead of 500 affinity, but the more and more time has gone on, the more I've kind of started to think, I think these end 3 just cost too much affinity, and a lot of people do not like rainbow build, but you know, it's just an issue here that this is 200, then all of a sudden we go to 300, and then it's 400, and then it's 500, right? So unless this end thing wins the game, I really won't be able to obtain it any faster than like turn 60 or 70, even if I'm going hard into one affinity. And it just, rainbow build right now is a bit too effective because it allows you to pick up at the very least, even if I have 2 points in Arcane would get me casting reserves in 30 turns. So by the last couple of battles, even if I pick up 2 Astral affinity on like turn 20, I could still have casting reserves by turn 50, whereas I'm gonna have to put like 10-20 affinity here just to reach the end of chaos. So let's start then talking about the chaos affinity. The first one is defeating an infestation grants you a unit based on the infestation defeated. This is obviously, as you might be thinking, not really that good. I can't get this early in the game because I'd have to spend Imperium on it. I can't get this early in the game, and getting an extra unit isn't really that important. I mean, it is important, but it's just not 100 Imperium level of importance, right? It is free, but I would still have to pay upkeep for it. And worse yet, it's probably not going to be my race. It's probably not going to be accenting my build. And the current way to play the early game right now, for the most part, is to have 4 units, so 2 heroes and 2 something running around clearing. Now, obviously, you can have more than that to help you clear a little bit more consistently, which definitely with the hero nerf, you'll probably have to do. And that is one thing, by the way, another thing, I think I talked about this in my previous video. When I was reviewing the beta patch for the first time around, I was kind of like really annoyed that they were nerfing heroes so much, but they did respond to that each time you unlock one of your signature skills. Now that's not like the skills that come off your signature skills. So at level 4, 8, 12, and 16, your hero gets an extra skill point. So your heroes will scale better, but they're going to be squishier in the early game. And I think that was actually overall a better way to do things. They should have just added the skill points originally. But at any rate, yes, the original clearing is going to be a little bit more difficult, but Call of Chaos unless I'm trying to get up to 18 units to sprint into another player, Call of Chaos is really not that big a deal. And in addition to that, even if I clear 2 infestations on my way to hitting another player, that's 100 Imperium to just grab some low tier units. It's really not going to be that big a deal, right? The only way I could see Call of Chaos really that big a deal is if I'm splitting my armies into 2, and I'm trying to do 1 hero plus an army, 1 hero plus an army, and I'm trying to power farm the map. Now, that does have some advantages, even for you single-player players, okay? Well, maybe not anymore, because I've heard the AI is really bad lately at clearing out their expansion. I've heard a lot of people say that the AI is really struggling to get high levels and things like that, but... sorry, woke up, my hair's kind of doing a thing right now, right? So, but one of the advantages would be to chain clear the map and deny your enemy farm and resources by clearing out what he could potentially get before he could get there. Now, in that world, Call of Chaos could get you 3-4 units, which could help you keep on the map for cheap and, you know, deploy those units exactly where you need them. But overall, it's just, I'm just saying Call of Chaos is just not as big a deal. Impressment. Now, here we're looking at 125 Imperium to get tier 1 units gain experience 50% faster. Now, once again, we can't get this in the early game. We're looking now at 40 Affinity to reach this, and there's going to be a recurring problem with the Chaos Affinity tree. If I got these things with no Imperium cost, that would be one thing, but obviously I don't. And so, do I want to be putting my Imperium into making my tier 1 units experience faster? Probably not. Especially because I couldn't really be getting this. Let's say I had even 4 Chaos Affinity from the start of the game. Let's say I went pretty hard, right? That would still be 10 turns, and then that would still be 125 Imperium. The earliest I could get this realistically is on turn 14. No, actually turn 15, because that'd be an extra 5 Imperium. I would have to set up my build super hard to get my first 2 cities out earlier, and then run to Impressment to get it. At either rate, for an average build player, we're looking at turn 15 before we could get to Impressment. Realistically, a bit later in the game, because starting with 4 Chaos Affinity, as we'll see, is kind of not a smart thing to do based on this Affinity chart. Yeah. Now, this brings us to battlefield looting. Once again, we're running into another issue with the Chaos tree. Gain 3 gold per unit tier of the units killed in combat. That means if I killed 3 tier 3 units, that would net me 27 gold. That's really not that big a deal. The best way battlefield looting could impact me is like if I started the game with it, but I don't. Once again, we're now looking at 60 Affinity, where even if we had 4, we couldn't even unlock this before turn 15. So even if we were going ham and trying to rush battlefield looting, it would be turn 15 before we got to battlefield looting. If we're clearing the map and we've set up our build to be able to mass expand early in the game, then we're going to be running into an issue here, obviously, where battlefield looting starts coming online after we take, you know, those good early game battles. Now, of course, later in the game, this could be good. If I take a fight with like a tier 5 unit, that's 15 gold, 2 tier 4 units, that's 24 gold. So with all this combined, that's what, around 50 gold, just off the top of my head. It's too early for me to be doing hard math. So we could maybe take a battle with a hard infestation, get 60, 70 gold off it, right? But once again, you know, over the course of a game, how much gold do you really think battlefield looting is going to be giving us? Let's say, I don't even know. Once we unlock it, I'll be lenient. Let's say I could get to 700 gold, right? I'm taking a tough battle. Let's say more. Let's say 1,000 gold, right? It's one of these skills that definitely is okay, but I would have to be rushing to grab it, and the earlier I grab it, the better. Later in the game, once we're starting to make plus 200 gold, plus 300 gold, plus 400 gold if you build for it, it loses effectiveness as the game goes on, despite it having some scaling on it. And, you know, and it's a problem where it's just one of these skills where I don't really want it. It's not a bad one. Of the 3 ones I've seen here, it's not a bad one. It just, okay. Now, I could see some people arguing for Impressment, going back to it for a second. I could see some people arguing for it by saying that this could help you evolve some of your tier 1 units. I agree. And maybe if you build for it, that would be nice. But, yeah. Okay, Lure of the Horde. When you win in battle, you have a 25% chance of gaining a tier 1 or tier 2 unit that can be produced in a city. So this kind of goes in here with Call of Chaos. if I'm trying to rush into a player and I'm trying to take a lot of fights, maybe I am running 2 armies at this point, and I am trying to clear as much on the map as I can in order to I just want to get all the rewards from it as quickly as I can, or alternatively, I just want to deny rewards to my enemy. Both of these are good options. So in this case, you could make an argument that all these are combining into having 2 armies power farming the map. And maybe if I set myself up with maybe Scions of Evil and a lot of Chaos Affinity, that I could run here and use Scions of Evil to generate more Imperium, and then I could be using a lot of these to be generating more units. You could argue that for sure, but here we're already into 100 Affinity to get Lure of the Horde. So this is, you know, probably going to be turn 25, just off the top of my head before we could get to it. We're already running into an issue where we're getting tier 1 and tier 2 units kind of later in the game, but there are some factions that, you know, could have more powerful early game units. Barbarians, for example, tier 1 and tier 2 units for Barbarians, pretty much all of them are good, so this would still be pretty decent for filling out my armies. 1025, maybe we're running 3 different armies, and maybe we're trying to clear the entire map really, really quickly. We would, of course, be running into the issue where if we've got 3 armies of low-tier units, our upkeep costs are still going to be pretty high. The triple enchantment build does work well, but one of the reasons it works well is because you generally don't start spamming that many units until the mid-game once you have some more sources of mana. Mana would actually start being restricted in the early game if I'm running 15 tier 1 and tier 2 units. That's going to start hurting me a lot more. But in particular, if I'm running all these armies of low tier units, it's going to be way more difficult for me to clear wonders. One of the easiest ways to clear wonders is to just sit your first 2 and then your first 3 heroes in one stack and use the fact that heroes will still be way more powerful than any normal unit you can get at this point. And you just power through the wonder, and that's how you can normally try to clear through. Bronze wonders can easily be cleared by 1 hero in a stack. Silver wonders, sure, maybe, but it's way easier with the triple hero. Gold wonders are not probably going to get cleared until either A, you're way later in the game with high tier units, or B, you're just triple heroing. At any rate, we're kind of running into an issue where this doesn't really work with how the meta is played right now, and a lot of people have just started ditching Chaos Affinity for it. Pillaging a province takes -1 turns and yields 20% more rewards. Pillaging units are healed for 20 hit points. So this one is actually quite good. For 200 Imperium, this one is quite good. This has synergy with some society traits. The one where you generate the resources for your items, that one is pretty good with skilled raiders because you're getting, what, 10 item resources each time you pillage, which sure isn't that much, but it'll add up over time. It's just free, right? It also has good synergy with the Oath of Strife, and just generally pillaging on a 1 turn instead of a 2 turn doubles the amount of pillaging. Then because you heal if you take any tough battles and then have to go to pillage, or if your enemy is casting world map spells on you and using the fact you don't get the 5 health regen in an opposing domain, you'll be able to keep your health up and continuing to pillage. So this one is actually generally good. This is also one of the ways, some people might be wondering, later in the game, you'll notice a lot of our battles are just 3 armies hitting each other with all the most units in it. There is one way to avoid that meta, and that's if you have some extra armies running into the back. Maybe you've got your 4th and 5th hero leading armies running into your enemy's back as far away as they can get, using cavalry units or something, and just trying to chain pillage. At a 2-turn activation, that's not going to be very effective. Now at a 1-turn activation, that is going to be effective. The 20% more rewards does, if the tooltip doesn't lie. Now I haven't personally tested this. This is one of those things where I trust the developers that the tooltip works. 20% more rewards should mean that this would, yes, yield more item juice, I'm going to call it that, if you're using that society trait. So that's 75 gold, 20% more of 75 is about 15. So 15 more gold is not really the end of the day, right? Like, this isn't some amazing number, right? But it does, the main thing here is this is a scaling effect that can very much impact me throughout a game. This also means even if all I'm doing is moving towards a city, and I'm pillaging provinces on my way into a city, I could be healing up after a battle that I took to defeat his armies to reach his city, Or I could just be ending my turns pillaging, get the free pillage, and then move on to the city. Or I could just be generating a lot of negative evil affinity to get Scions of Evil stacked all the way up. Or I could just be trying to pillage a Spelljammer in one turn so my enemy can't react to it. What I'm saying here is Skilled Raiders is probably the best part of the Chaos Affinity. So this brings us to Chaos Empire Skill, War Slaves. I don't know why I said it like that. Raising cities grants 1 population to one of your cities for every 3 population of a city that was raised. This one comes in pretty late. So this one already came in at 120 affinity. This one comes in 160 affinity. And there are not going to be a lot of cities being raised anymore. Not really. You could be doing a build that kind of relies on this. Maybe you're doing a despoiler build, and maybe even into the late game you're going to be raising cities a lot. It does generate a lot of gold. It does generate a lot of resources, things like that. I think it's not worthless. It's one of these things where it's like, all right, let's say I pillaged a city with 10, 12 population. I get 4 population in one of my cities. It's not bad by any stretch of imagination. It's just like, you'll quickly see compared to the actual good trees, once they're kind of getting deep in, stuff like this is just not comparable. Now this one is another really good one. Tireless Marchers. Forced March costs 75% less mana and inflicts 75% less damage to your units. Now, one of the things people don't get about Forced March, you Force March, end your turn, you don't heal. You Force March, end your turn, you don't heal. But here's the thing. If I Force March, use that movement, then next turn use my regular movement, don't Force March, I'll heal because the debuff will wear off at the end of that second turn. And then on the third starting turn, I'll heal and I'll out-heal all the Forced March damage. So Forced March, this one's really good, but it's mostly good for repositioning across your entire empire. In fact, I think in my original statement, I kind of oversold it to you guys. Because generally speaking, what you do with Forced March, you Force March, lots of movement, then you use regular movement, then you heal the full anyway, right? So this one can be beneficial though if you've got very high health units who can't really heal up in one turn, or if you need a Force March 2 or even 3 turns in a row to mass redeploy across your empire, or if you're just spamming Force March to pillage enemy lands, you're for example, you know where one of his Spelljammers in, and you're Force Marching hopefully quicker than he can teleport back to defend it. So it's not useless. It does have its applications. It is good, I would say. But once again, we're going to be running into issues where enemy affinity, the actual good ones, at this tier are going to be doing good things. Raising cities yields 20 permanent income. So much like War Slaves, Spoils of Destruction runs into the issue. This one required 160 affinity. This one requires 300 affinity. So this one means you would literally need to generate double the amount of affinity you needed for this one. So Chaos already has an issue where it doesn't really generate that much knowledge. Chaos Tomes don't generate knowledge. Chaos Factions don't generally generate knowledge. And now we're getting into an issue where the primary source of knowledge comes from books. Well, obviously, if I don't have as many books because I don't have as much knowledge, it's going to be way harder for Chaos to get into these higher end things. Later in the game, you're going to be raising less and less cities. Early in the game, you can raise your city-state. You can raise city-states that just randomly spawned on the map, either in the overground or in the other underground. You can maybe try to take out another player and raise their cities, but you're quickly going to be running out of players that are easy targets, for sure. And then you're also going to be running out of cities that are easy targets. But once we look at Spoils of Destruction and War Slaves, these are pretty late in the game to be getting boosts to things that have probably already happened. Now, Spoils of Destruction, if the developers are ever looking, I think this could be good if this tracked all the cities you raised throughout the game already. So let's say I raised 4 cities, then I unlock Spoils of Destruction, I just automatically get 80 more gold income. That would actually be one way to make it better and to give Chaos like this like mid to late game, kick in the pants and, kind of like, okay, you spent your whole game raising cities, here's Spoils of Destruction for you, right? Because that's generally how things like, and I'm just going to go over here, focus studies works. It doesn't say research posts from now on that you set up grant 5 knowledge. It just grants it right now. So I think, and this is just my advice to developers, make Spoils of Destruction just count how many cities you've raised throughout the game and just give you the reward once you unlock it. That would make a good way to make these higher end chaos things a bit better. Okay. Destined Conquerors is not bad. It's not amazing, but it's not bad. 30 grievances against all other empires. These cannot be traded or lost. This can allow you to declare just wars against basically anyone, but if somebody's kind of like fabricated against you and denounced you, it can be difficult to overcome that. One of the funny things you can do is if you don't want someone to declare on you, you just fabricate against them, denounce them, and then you don't declare the war. You just sit with them being so evil that any war they declare on you is unjustified. But at any rate, 50 gold and 50 mana per war you're involved in. It's pretty easy to be involved in 2-3 wars. 150 gold, 150 mana, that one's pretty good. Obviously, the only issue here is now we've gone from 300 affinity to 400 affinity. I would say Destined Conquerors is not bad. By any stretch of imagination, I would say it's quite good as well. I know I keep saying that. It's just like a lot of these chaos things, it's like you have to do so much to set them up. They could probably make some of this high-end tree a little bit better, I think. I don't know how War Slaves could be buffed to like already affect you in a way. Maybe it could be something where like your throne city gets bonus food and production for each city you've raised, and then it counts the total number of cities. So then like once you unlock it, you then get like 20, like I don't know, 15 production, 15 food for each city you raised, right? So if you raised 4 cities, 60 food, 60 production, that might be good. It might not be as good. I don't know. I'm just spitballing ideas here. So you combine that with this, and you could definitely, you know, start getting a good amount of stuff for actually raising cities and playing the game as the Chaos Affinity wants you to do. So Destined Conquerors is pretty decent though. It'll solve most of your mana issues and most of your gold issues if you just get involved in 3+ wars. So that one's decent. Here we have Reign of Destruction. Raising cities takes 2 less turns, which is actually pretty good. Raising cities yields 50 gold per population. Gain a tier 3 unit of the raised city's culture. That last part is kind of worthless. If we ever make it to 500 affinity, my stacks need to be my culture. They need to be my race. They need to be synergistic with my empires. Because the problem is, if I'm doing like an Angels build or a Demons build or anything like that, I want all my units to be synergizing with the build I've made the entire game. I don't want to randomly be lighting my own units on fire with Cleansing Flame because they don't have any of my, you know, but... So the Raising Cities takes -2 turns. That's really good. Quite frustrating to fight. Does that... No, it doesn't synergize with that. I just had to double check for my own sake. So, making cities raise quicker is obviously quite powerful. Makes it so enemies can react less. A lot of times what people will do is let you siege a city and then start the raise and then start fighting back against it. Because they were just trying to reposition or redeploy their units or whatever. So this just makes it much, much faster, which just allows you to choose things better. Now, the 50 gold per population is still good, but like, as we start getting this late into the game, like let's say I burned a city with 20 population, I make 1,000 gold. Like, you know, cool. It'll let me build up some extra units, but 1,000 gold late in the game, that lets me maybe buy out 2 tier 4 units if I'm guesstimating on the top of my head. I'm not saying it's bad, but yeah. Now the gain a unit of tier 3, yeah, it's fine, I guess. I don't know. Whatever. So Chaos Affinity as a whole is running into an issue. Most of this early game just does nothing. And sometimes I don't think I've actually even unlocked it when I go Chaos Affinity. I think I literally just save up to get my 5th city if I'm doing a Chaos build. Some of these later ones can start being pretty good and pretty, actually, well, good. But one of the issues is it's just going to take so long to unlock them unless we're going full Chaos Affinity meme build. Now, the one-time unlockables, your Throne City loses 1 population, but immediately summons a Balor with power from Slaughter. This would be good if we didn't take till like turn 70 to get to it. It is strong, I guess, and power from Slaughter can be good, but at this point in the game, now they have buffed mythics in the beta patch, so the Balor is looking more Balorful, right? Will he scale that well? I'm not that sure. But at the very least, the mythic buffs do make the Balor look a little bit better. So maybe I'm underestimating this. But, you know, at this point, we've probably already had a tier 5 tome. We'd probably be able to get Balors on our own, right? Now, unit permanently gains 1 hit point and 1% damage when killing an enemy unit. Stacks 50 times. That's okay, but the thing is, a lot of people look at the end and they go, I can get up to 50 HP. If your Balor is personally killed 50 units, the game has been over for 20 turns. So you're victory lapping, right? Power from Slaughter would probably be better if it was like, it gains 10 hit points and 10% damage when killing a unit, stacks up to 5 times. Now that would be achievable, and that would make the end of Chaos Tree get like a gagoosh kind of effect, right? That would make this like dominating Balor. That would be pretty cool. You only get to use this once, by the way. So if the Balor dies, it's gone for the entire campaign. The other effect, for 250 Imperium, your cities gain 500 draft this turn. In a pinch, this can be useful for helping you out of a tough situation. This can allow you to basically replace, out of your throne city, this can allow you to get maybe half a stack of some decently tiered units. Out of all your cities, this could allow you to completely replace an 18 stack of low tier units. Since this is 160 affinity, this isn't coming out of the early game at all. So at best, this would be a decent way to replace your army with, probably if we're looking to get 18 decent quality units, we're looking at maybe 1 or 2 armies of tier 3 units throughout all your cities, so long as you've built them up to enable them to build tier 3. It's okay. It's not blowing my mind, but yeah, it's fine. Instantly summon a bandit army under your control to your throne city. This is 100 Imperium. This is, I don't think I've ever seen this get used, so I can't really even weigh it, but I imagine it's not that great. Okay. So that's Chaos Affinity. Just, blech. So now let's go. I'm gonna sprint over. I'm gonna try to do it worst to best, so there's not like some huge disparity, and you don't get like whiplash from being like, oh my god, that's so much better. Well, no, let's just go through it into, let's just do order here. Okay, so first order, destroying an infestation or conquering a free city grants a stacking through interrelations with all other free cities. This one's pretty easy to get, only needs 15 Imperium, Affinity, obviously, 100 Imperium. It's not too useful, but what it can do is give you huge relations. If you are doing a vassal state build, where you're just trying to conquer players and create a bunch of vassal areas, and you want to get them all to maximum vassalitude, this is actually kind of weirdly good in that situation. This is more of a late game thing than an early game thing. For like, if you're conquering another player, you could keep stacking this buff and getting so many relations with all the free cities that you can just easily like cruise them to maximum vassalage. It's not actually that bad. It's weird. It's just, you don't really go at early game. Now, free Whispering Stone. Once again, if you're doing the city-state build, this is more useful in the late game than the early game. But there are some builds out there in the world that can be good with an extra Whispering Stone. Worst case scenario, you shove it in one of your cities and you give it 20 stability over 10 turns. So it's just, once again, you're not going to be getting it early game because at 125 Imperium, you don't really care about that. Okay, vassals grant 10 golden tribute. This is really not that amazing. Once again, this is more for like late game. If you have 6 vassals at 60 gold, so we're really not breaking the bank on this one. Let's put it that way, right? Like, as compared to some other ones, which you'll see could be better. I mean, it is early, so what are you gonna do? Whatever. Now, shock, shield, and polearm units get experience 30% faster. I wouldn't really recommend you rush to this one because it's so good, you must have it. But once you have that spare 175 Imperium, this is pretty much an auto grab. This affects Pyre Templars, which are the best unit in the game still, even after losing 1 defense on the beta. So they're still blatantly the best unit in the game. So getting your Pyre Templars to legendary rank 30% faster is pretty good. It also affects most of your, in fact, it pretty much affects every melee unit in the game. Shock, shield, and polearm. That only affects, so it doesn't affect skirmishers and fighters. Well, there's no tier 4 fighter in the game right now. So even if you're doing a Tyrant Knight build, this still affects your Tyrant Knights. This is just generally good. I'm not saying it's like, oh my god, so amazing, but like, yeah, if you have 175 Imperium, just pick it up. It helps you, right? Units recruited through Rally of Lieges get +2 rank upon recruitment. So this one is useful if you're trying to rebuild an army in a pinch, especially if you're doing a vassal build. You can quickly get a lot of units recruited to you know, just at +2 rank. It's not bad. One of the issues is that when you're recruiting through your main city, especially because of the governor and things like that, with the new governor trait, recruiting governor gives +2 rank to the city. Your empire, your ruler gives +1 rank to the city. Then you got the barracks and you got the armory. And then if you've got a smith's guild, because you're really trying to do like a tier 3 unit build and you want to recruit those tier 3 units at maximum rank, you can get your units recruited pretty decently. Now, what Rally Allegiance does do is affect tier 4 units that you could recruit through it. And it does affect tier 3. For tier 1 and 2, I'd pretty much always draft them. There's like no point in trying to rally them unless you're like in a desperate situation, right? But this can, for builds that haven't focused too much on getting recruit ranks to their mid to high tier units, especially with the buff to mythic units, this is better. It's just not really that good. It also comes in, we're starting to look at 120 affinity. So I kind of use the chaos to give you guys a general idea as to like affinity and like how difficult the tiers get. So I'm not going to try to spend too much time on it now. But as you can see, we're already up to 120 affinity. We can't really get this in the early game. If we're trying to like rally on our first rally and recruit units at a decent rank to rush someone, this is not going to be available in time. Overall, it's fine. Once again, it's one of those things where you could pick it up if you want, but vassals gain +1 allegiance levels when first vassalized. Converting conquered cities into vassals takes -1 turn. So, this combos decently. Oh, where is it? Is it you? Founding, migrating, and absorbing cities takes -2 turns. I think there's something else we can vassalize. Which is it? Am I crazy? I think it's haste berries. Founding, migrating, and absorbing cities. It's something. Anyway, this does combo pretty well, and you can vassalize cities in 1 turn, which is pretty good. Your enemies don't really get to react to that. +1 allegiance levels. This does mean if you take out a player and you're mass vassalizing his cities, they'll enter into you at a higher tier, and you'll just do it quicker. So it's generally good. It's fine in the situation it's in, but once again, we're late in the game at 160 affinity. So if I had to guesstimate, like turn 30. So this isn't really useful in a rush. This is more like if you did a mid-game takedown on a player. But in that situation, it can be useful, I guess. But there's no world. Thus far, there's nothing here that I would slow down my 5th city for, other than maybe career soldiers. If I'm trying to get a tempo play out of tier 2 or tier 3 units to like get an 18 stack out of some decent quality units and run into someone. Okay. Justified wars gain 20 grievances against players with an opposing alignment. This one's fine. I mean, getting grievances against players lets you declare war much easier. It's fine. But 300 Imperium and 200 Affinity is starting to get pretty late in the game, and that's a lot of Imperium to get grievances. But there are some situations where you just gotta get grievances to declare on somebody. Okay. House levies. Recruiting units during the Rally of Lieges costs -50% gold, and the turns between rallies is reduced by 5. So there are situations, I have seen some people do this, where they do builds based on rallying, and they don't really so much buff up their armies. They just stack up as much knowledge as they can with whatever tome. Don't really care about enchantments or anything like that. They're just going for mythic units, and they grab some gold wonders maybe, and they use these silver and gold wonders, and they just recruit a lot of units. It's not amazing, and I haven't really seen anyone do it in a while, but I have seen people hypothetically do it. It's just 350 Imperium. Ugh. Okay, over here, your vassals grant 10% more resources and tribute. This seems good in theory, but for 400 Imperium, I'm gonna get like, even with a shitload of cities, I'm gonna be getting like 40 gold, 40 mana, and 10 knowledge. when you really break down the actual numbers in some of these things, you realize how really weak they are for end node. 400 Imperium and 400 Affinity for this. I think this could be your vassals grant 25% more resources, and that would be good. But at 10%, all 10% aren't made equal. 10% of nothing is nothing. Okay, so our end thing here can be pretty good. So any unit that gets to legendary rank gets an additional buff. For example, shield units get unbreakable, they get fearless and grant fearless to all allies if they're in defense mode, which can be good. That's just immunity to all morale reduction. Polearm units get a 60% chance of inflicting decaying, which is insane. Thank you, Pyre Templars. This just means if you ever get legendary rank Pyre Templars, you get absolutely nutty buffs to them. This is very strong. Shock units get a 30% chance to stun. Not very reliable, and because shock units only attack once, it's not really that big a deal. Stunning enemies on hit, though, would be quite frustrating, so I understand why they want it to be small. Personally, maybe just redo it, and maybe make it like this unit's attacks give enemies -5 morale. That would probably be better. Something like that. Or maybe when this unit kills a unit, all enemies within 3 tiles get -10 morale. I don't know, something. Right now, a chance to stun is obviously really good, but it's so low, and especially late in the game with status resist, we're looking at like a 10% chance to stun. I'm not saying it's worthless, but like it's so unreliable that like screwing up my tactical turn because, oh shoot, that unit is stunned, I shouldn't kill them, right? Like it's kind of just not worth it. Skirmishers get Windborne, 50% evasion. Evasion is generally not very useful for a lot of reasons I've gone over in these videos, but 50% evasion is a lot of it. So a lot of a resource that's not too good does start being a little bit more useful. Not blowing my mind though. Support units get Soul Warden. All support abilities grant 2 bolstered resistance. That one is blowing my mind. Now this one is mostly useful if you can get your support units a lot of free actions or some AoEs. For example, Reign of Prosperity is pretty good for this. Because it just, every unit affected gets 2 bolstered resistance. It's just good. Battle mages get a 60% chance of inflicting weakened. Yeah. Battle mages stay losing. Ranged units get Giant Slayer, which is obviously pretty good. This unit does 40% more damage to large targets. Now, mythic units are better, so people might be building more mythic units. Giant Slayer does help you take down things like Umbral Mistresses, though, which is really good. Dragons got buffed, so we might see some more dragon builds, maybe not, but they were part of the mythic unit buff. The problem with dragons are way too expensive. Like, dragons are very, very, very powerful now with the buffs. They're just so expensive, but fighter units get Frenzy. That gives you a strengthened every time you attack, which is pretty good. And mythic units get a strengthened and regeneration on kill, which is actually far less impactful than you think. At either rate, mostly for the polearm buff, this is absolutely insane. Very good end node, because this just turns your Pyre Templars. Basically, in other words, if you have Knightly Orders and Pyre Templars, you kind of just win every long fight because they can't heal and they're taking more damage. It's very, very powerful. But overall, you'll be noticing I said basically for this entire tree that, yeah, I wouldn't take any of that. And that's kind of the problem. I think even the Chaos tree has more things that are like game changing and strong. But then like when I look at the Order Affinity tree, like almost all of these are very conditional. Even their end is just very conditional, right? And so like if you're going Pyre Templars, it's crazy strong, but other than that, and that's just kind of the issue with the Order Affinity tree. It's way too conditional. In fact, I think this might actually be the worst tree, which brings us to Nature. Now, Nature is not the worst tree, but we're going to start seeing with the release some effects which actually help the game. Now, Fruitful Integration is an interesting one. Why is it interesting? Founding or absorbing cities takes -2 turns. Newly founded or absorbed cities grant +1 population. Now, one thing about Fruitful Integration, it's generally not worth slowing down your first 2 cities to get this. Because at the end of the day, I can spend 100 Imperium and slow down my cities to then speed up my cities. and then they get more population, but they would have gotten that population had I set them up earlier anyway. So fruitful integration, you don't even get until your 4th and 5th city. Now, it does have one advantage, though. If I'm just screwed in the early game, but I do have nature affinity, what I can do is just go, okay, I'm not going to be able to found my city until a couple turns later anyway, because I just haven't found anything. Let me go fruitful integration. That'll allow my cities to kind of pull back and catch up to other people. I had to spend 100 Imperium for it, but at the very least, now I can try to catch up to other people. It will set you back a bit to go it, but it is an option. Now your second one comes in at 40 affinity, meaning pretty early. Farms grant 5 food. As I've mentioned before, there's a bunch of them. Even the nerfed mines grant mana is like generally more useful. Even after it got nerfed, it used to be 10 mana, now it's 5. But it's fine. Farms grant 5 food. It's like on average maybe 10 15 food per city if you don't delete your farms. It's really not as amazing, I think, as the developers thought it was. They probably don't want you to have to go soil tenders to make farms good, but it also could maybe just be like +8. It wouldn't be very aesthetic to be 8, but it would at the very least make people want to get some nature affinity to grant soil tenders. Maybe it'd be too good, probably not. The rate, it kind of sucks when you compare it. I know it's way deep in the tree, but Focus Studies is just so good, and it just blows out Arcane Artisans and Soil Tenders. Natural Recovery is one of these things that you don't want to rush it, obviously, but if you get into the mid-game, once the units start getting like 150 HP, especially if you're doing Nature Signature, giving them 10 more HP from your heroes, Natural Recovery can kind of, I'm not going to say like be vital, but it can be really useful to like heal your units in like 2 to 3 turns rather than like 4 turns, right? Because it's hard to spend 4 turns healing your units in the mid game. Expert Sailors is really bad. Originally I thought it was good, but then like someone actually did the math for me and I was like, oh yeah. So if you have 10, count it, 10 provinces in a coast, river, underground lake, 10 of them, you're getting 20 food. Now, I think the developers, when they originally made, because they never buffed this tree, I think when they originally made this tree, they didn't really understand how useless food was, but getting +2 food per coast, river, underground lake is really, really, really weak. This could be 3, and I would still kind of call it weak, but at least it would be better. It would be usable, right? Expert Sailors should definitely be buffed to 3. I think Soil Tenders should also be buffed to like 8. That would make the early game of this tree a little bit better, but it's not the worst tree. I mean, it does have some things that I'll take just because I have Imperium, and they're not useless. Expansive Reach. Cities may expand to provinces located +2 provinces further from the center. This one's actually useful. It's not like all the time, but like you just gotta reach something, or if there's something outside your maximum reach, like a resource you can kind of grab from another player and yoink that back into your city. Expansive Reach can actually be pretty useful for that, especially because nature builds tend to float food. It's just because how the food formula works, and the developers really need to work on this. Getting your food above 20 is like practically a waste. And even if you focused on food like the entire game and your opponent didn't focus on food at all, they'll generally be 18 population to your 20 population. So it's just, food just generally isn't that good at all. Just, I've mentioned a lot in these videos, but every tier of population you go up starts being significantly more food to get to the next tier. But all food does is give you flat resources. So at first you need to spend like 40 food to get 5 production, but then you're spending like 400 food to get 5 production. It's just, it's not worth it. It's not worth it to go into a food build. It's not worth it to even care about food, because all you do by stacking food all game is you get 1 more population on your city. If you stack food all game, you get 2 more. Okay. But at the very least, Expansive Reach allows you from this tree to reach out and steal shit from people, which is the biggest deal. Wild Expansion used to be overpowered back when the game launched. It's now pretty useless. Completing a province annexation summons an animal unit under your control. Why is this useless? The majority of the time, you're going to expand your cities, look at the unit, and delete it. because it's just taking mana income. Sometimes you get a tier 3 animal, and I have used it once to rebuild my armies to actually beat another player, because I quickly grabbed, I think, 3 ice spiders from it. But I was pretty lucky to get 3 ice spiders from my expansion, right? That's 3 tier 3 units, right? So I was pretty lucky to do that. And I was in the north, and in the north, ice spiders are just generally going to be some of the best units you can grab. So in that specific situation, wild expansion ended up being pretty good. But in your average game, you don't want animals to begin with, because you're probably not doing an animal build, right? So you don't even synergize with this, and then you don't even want animals in your army, because they have no synergy, and they're generally not that great to begin with. So wild expansion, 250 Imperium to get mostly units that you want to delete. Now, natural order, this is kind of jank. It's 300 Imperium, and it starts coming in at 200 nature affinity, so it's pretty, and that's one thing. This is 160 nature affinity, so to get this at any point in time before like the mid to late game, you'd have to be splurging nature affinity. So this isn't something you can use to like boost early game armies. Now, this is every province with a forest feature gets +2 city stability. Personal opinion, this should probably be changed to something else. It's kind of jank that an affinity tree pushes you into doing a forest build, because that's just Tome of Paradise. Now, I understand Tome of Paradise is easy to get, but there's a lot of nature builds that don't give a shit about forests, and there's a lot of nature builds that don't give a shit about animals. So it's weird that here and here, I think, like, it's weird that like most affinities aren't just trying to directly go for one build. Most of the time, like, anyone can pillage, right? Anyone can raise a city. Anyone can declare war on other empires, right? It's just weird. Like, this just really is not useful ever unless you're doing an early game animal build. This is really not useful. In fact, it's just directly not useful if you don't have a forest build. Because if you don't have a forest build, this basically reads get like 10 stability at most on your cities. But if you do have a forest build, this is every population gives you a stability. Sorry, 2 stability, which is pretty good, right? So with natural order and some Tome of Paradise stuff, I've ended up with cities with like 130 stability, like an absolutely insane amount, right? And in that situation, it's really good and it just works. It's just like, I'm just really good with the Tome of Paradise, but like, you can't just like slot in nature into a primal, I don't even know, a primal Dune Serpent build, because the desert isn't going to have many cities, which feels bad, right? Cities gain 3 mana for each resource node in their domain. Resource nodes are every like specialized buff tile. This one is really good. Throughout your empire, you're probably going to have like 30 of these, and suddenly just gaining like 30 is probably an undershoot. I've gone and gained like over 100 mana every time I've clicked this button. Okay, so we're looking at 300 affinity, so this is pretty late in the game, right? But once I've been doing a nature build and into the late game, especially with Force of Nature, you can start running out of mana. Druidic Care gives you that mana. I often say mana isn't useful, but it starts being useful once you have Force of Nature. Force of Nature is their tier 5 tome buff, and oh, it can cost a lot of upkeep. It's practically impossible to afford without Druidic Care. But then again, there'd be no way to get to it without getting Druidic Care, right? So Druidic Care, pretty good. Now, this brings us to Rangers. Movement cost for friendly units in your domain reduced by -2 move points. This one is also pretty good. This allows you to rapidly redeploy across your empire, defend cities, or just generally get reinforcements back to your armies to replace lost units really fast. Rangers is pretty good. It's not like some game-breaking late-game skill, but it's one of these skills that, like, once you get it, you're gonna be like, oh my god, like just cruising across my empire. 400 affinity though, so this is like late game. Okay, so that brings us to Druidic Empire. Your cities grant 100% more food. This is an end node. Kind of going into why no one tries to go mono affinity. This it really doesn't do that much, because again, the problem is once we're starting to get to these late game cities, we go from needing like 100 food per population in the mid game to like 400 food per population. Basically, Druidic Empire lets us get a couple more pops in our cities before the increasing penalties just starts going out of control, because it's gonna be 400 and then it's gonna go beyond that, right? So Druidic Empire, even once I've gotten it, and you might think to yourself, but isn't it good now? Isn't all your food good now? No, because most of the time what happens is it's just another 100% multiplier. I already probably have some multipliers on food from positive stability from Tome of Paradise, giving me plus 30%. So I go from 130% to 230%. Plus there could be other multipliers for food from things like terraformers, Druidic terraformers, a society trait. So at any rate, Druidic Empire is really not that great. Because you just, like, the more food you have, you just need more and more food. It can kind of be good from getting you to that expansion win condition if you're just like a little bit off. Like if you just needed like 10 more, this can be a way to get you those 10 more provinces to start that win condition. But this used to be your cities require negative 50% food, which was significantly better because of how it mathed out. So I think Druidic Empire could probably be buffed to like 125% more food, but it's not useless. It's just not something I'm shooting for. Okay. So that brings us to Materium. Now, Materium Affinity is like the first affinity track I'm going to say is like, you're going to look at it and you're going to be like, okay, that's like good. Oh man, that's good too. So here we go to Outpost. Outpost costs 25% less gold, and founding and upgrading Outpost takes -1 turn. Now, if you're doing a lot of outposts throughout the map, if you're going with Industrious or Barbarian or any of this stuff, this only takes 15 affinity. So if you took 1 affinity of Materium, you could get this in 15 turns. If you did anything with Materium, you get this by the time it matters, right? So if you're finding a lot of cities to grab wonders, to grab resource nodes, just to screw other people and found outposts right outside their cities, to again screw with them and make it so that they generate grievances against you by expanding to your outpost, this is just generally good. This is the first thing we've seen here. Fruitful integration you'll definitely take eventually. You'll probably take pacification. You will likely never take Call of Chaos, but you'll pretty much always end up taking military engineering. Not every game, but I would say the majority of the games. Here we have city structures cost 20% less gold to build. Now for these ones, you did notice have the lower affinity. I kind of skipped over them, but these ones in Materium, you'll start noticing this is where things change. For a mere 40 affinity, so if I had 2 affinity in Materium, if all I did was take 1 Materium tome, I would get this in 20 turns. So if I took it an early Materium tome, or if I just took 2 society traits in Materium, or I was industrious, turn 21, we have minus 20% gold cost on our city structures. This can add up a lot. So my mouth keeps drying out. So this can be 20% less gold. If you think about it, if I have 5 cities, that means that 5th city isn't costing me any gold to be building my buildings on. 20% less gold, this adds up, and this can make things much more affordable. Now, arcane artisans might have been over nerfed. I think the devs maybe compensated a little bit too hard. At plus 10 mana, it kind of made mana useless, because if you had 2 gold mines per city, 5 cities, 10 gold mines getting 100 mana from a pretty early game node, that was a bit too much. It was one of the biggest reasons mana just floated so high. So maybe they went a little bit too hard on arcane artisans, but it's still fine. You'll still pick it. You'll still like getting the 50 mana from it for sure. It's not bad at all. It's one of these ways you can generate mana without giving a shit about mana, which is one of the reasons you don't care about mana, is because you get mana from things like this. So I would say these 3, you'll probably pick all of them all game. That brings us to your throne cities, and cities that share a border with the throne city get 10% in all types of income. Once again, 10% is much smaller than you think. This means if you generate 100, you generate 110. But, you know, once you connect to your throne city, you could probably get your throne city and then 2 other cities connected to it. If your main 3 cities have this, it's fine. It's not bad. It's pretty good. I would always take it for the most part. There's no reason to not click this button, right? I would always click this button, in fact. So I would say Metropolitan Society is pretty good. It's fine. It's not like blowing my mind. It's not like, oh my god. But yeah, I mean, it's again, we're only looking at so far 100 affinity. So even if all I had was 2 affinity in Materium, I'm getting this on turn 50, which is pretty late in the game. But the fact you still just get a pretty good buff turn 50 just for having, like, what do I get turn 50 for being 2 into nature? I get expert sailors. Here I would get career soldiers. Here I would get lure of the horde. Do you understand the differences here that we're starting to see? Here we have specialist districts. Special province improvements grant +5 gold. We'll probably have at least 2 per city on average of 5 cities. Your earlier cities will have more. Your later cities will have less. You're looking at the very least 50, 60, 70 gold from this. This does start adding up. So specialist districts, arcane artisans, master masons. We are looking in a world here where the Materium affinity tree, Metropolitan Society, this just started to generate a lot of resources for us. Like just off our affinity track, we can get so many resources off Materium affinity. Like, and I'm hoping this is starting to teach you guys like why these 3 affinities are just not as good, because like literally just by sitting on Materium affinity, look at what we're getting here. So we move on. Province improvements grant 1 stability for each adjacent province improvement of the same type. This one is hard to quantify. Often it'll give like 10 stability. Sometimes I've seen it at like 20. It's not nearly as much as you're hoping for. It's kind of jank and hard to quantify. 10 to 20 seems to be about the number. It's not blowing my mind. And at 250 Imperium, it's not a button I'm going to click if I have anything better to do. But it is a button if I have 250 Imperium floating around. It's like, well, you know, okay. Gain 1 siege project. Siege projects cost 25% less. Obviously, you kind of combo that with, you know, siege specialization. So this allows you to get to 4 siege projects between these two, which is kind of pointless, because if we put 4 siege projects into a siege, no one's going to defend against it anyway. But hey, they cost 25% less. So 4 siege projects cost the same as 3 siege projects, I guess. So, you know, whatever. Is 200 Materium affinity. So here we have 300 Materium affinity. Special province improvements cost 25% less production in gold. Little bit late in the game for this to start hitting us. We've probably set up all our good special province improvements at this point throughout all our cities. Comes in a little bit late, which is kind of the problem with a lot of these later affinities. There's like, you'll notice there's like a good reason to have like 2 to 4 industrious, or I should say Materium affinity. There's like a good reason to have 2 to 4, but why would I want to go to like 10, 12 to grab provincial architects, right? Like, do I really want to be giving up the early affinity tracks of the other affinities? Do I really want to be giving that up? Because again, all I would need is 2, just 2 Astral affinity gets me this by turn 30, but I have to be sinking like 6, 8 extra into Materium to get this. Hopefully this is starting to make you understand things. Okay. So here, your units regenerate an additional 1 hit point per 2 move points they have remaining at the end of your turns. So if you sit in armies still, they could heal like 80, which could be useful for sure. I'm not saying this is bad. I'm just saying, like, we're starting to look at like a niche benefit to something. There's like, I could imagine situations where this is good, but compared to some of the other late game affinities, it's like, so we have one that's not very good, we have one that's kind of niche, and it's definitely useful, but whatever. And this only affects the world map, by the way, not the battle, obviously. Now, this one is kind of nuts. Unit upkeep is reduced by 10% per rank that unit has. So this one is actually really funny, because this one allows you to go, hypothetically, if you went full Materium Infinity, and you got to martial ancestry, and you got constructs, and you recruited your constructs at a high rank due to tomes and things like that, you could get your constructs to be a low tier to where you just field full armies of tier 5 units and just don't even notice it. It's kind of funny. So the only problem is mythic units are generally bad. They are getting buffed in the beta. We'll see. I think they still probably won't be worth using. They probably need to address enchantment stacking on racial units, or alternatively, they need to bring more enchantments that you can put on mythic units. You know, things like how Force of Nature works, stuff like that. Things that you can like late game boost your in mythic units. But at either rate, this is a pretty funny way to just go full golden golem. Like I don't know if you guys watching when I played Materium. I think I had like 10 golden golems, 5 severing golems, and like that was my army. And I could have afforded like 2 or 3 more armies. Like I think I could be sitting at like 6 armies of them, because yeah, it's pretty funny. Oh, I forgot to mention the one-time uses of these other. Shoot. Okay, let me go back here for a second. One time, and one of the reasons I didn't mention them is, well, you'll see. Instantly gain 20 allegiance to all free cities. Sure, cool, whatever. All units instantly gain all hit points, and non-hero units get 1 rank. This can be useful for getting your units to legendary rank before battle. If my units aren't legendary rank, if they're elite, and I just gotta get them to legendary for nightly orders, this can be a 1-game use. Sure. Rally Allegiance event where you may recruit units at no cost. It's 500 Imperium and only useful at 500 Affinity. So like, cool, I guess. But if we're this late in the game, most mythic and pretty much any unit that isn't my race is going to be useless. So, okay. This one gets a Spirit Wolf with Guardian Spirit and Resurgence. If you are doing an animal build, this one is really good, because you get a Spirit Wolf, which is already a pretty decent unit. It is Guardian Spirit. Friendly animal units in combat with this unit gain +1 defense and 1 resistance. This was actually bugged and not working the other day. I'm kind of hoping they fixed it, but yeah. Then it has Resurgence, so if the unit dies, it just resurrects at your throne city. So this is a one-time use. You get a tier 3 Spirit Wolf. It's not as good as other tier 3 units, or even close to as good as other tier 3 units, but with Guardian Spirit, it buffs all your animals. So this is a good way to rush out and get an animal build to kill someone. All your cities get 1 population. This could be useful for beating people to the win condition of expansion win condition, but generally the expansion win condition is won by people like vassalizing a bunch of cities in a row. It's not really won by just sitting there and expanding. I've never seen someone just sit there and expand till they get it. Instantly gain 20 knowledge for each province in your empire's domain. The problem is, the more your domain size, the more your knowledge cost to your tomes, because the more domain you have, the bigger your cities, the more knowledge you've generated, the higher tier tomes you've gone through. Each tome increases a flat cost to the knowledge of more tomes, etc., etc. Basically, the later in the game you go, the more Rite of Awakening gives you, but the later in the game you go, the more you need to make Rite of Awakening good. It's kind of weird. I've actually never really activated it. It can be useful to like get a research 1 turn early, maybe 2 turns early, like in a pinch. Okay, and so that brings us to the one-time use from Materium. So the first one-time use is gain the breastplate of the champion hero item. Now, this item was probably better before they added the whole forge thing, but even with the forge still in the game, it's actually not a bad item at all. So it's a chest plate. It gives 2 defense, 20% damage with melee, and 20% critical hit chance with melee. So on average, 30% damage, but that crit chance can be pretty impactful for proccing some things like the Death Knight's healing on crit, right? Now, the problem is it doesn't give resistance. So as the game goes on and the game goes on, not having that 2 to 3 resistance on your chest plate will start being more and more painful as your character gets hit. But if you're just trying to assassinate people, or you're just trying to do a lot of damage, this is obviously a really good item. Yeah. Instantly generate 2,000 gold for 250 Imperium. I've definitely clicked this button. I've definitely seen other people click this button. As compared to the draft one at the same tier, this one is like applicable to a lot of different situations. You can use this to instantly recruit some higher tier units, buy them out. This can allow you to get some buildings you need. This can allow you to do a lot of different things. I have definitely seen this used. I've literally seen it used to buy out the expansion victory quicker, just so that one player could beat another player to activating the expansion victory condition. Because, as you know, if you activate the expansion victory condition before another player, that means that they need to come into your cities and break it, which can't really be possible in every situation with spelljammers and things like that. Especially in the late game, you just can't attack right. Like, you're just gonna lose on the attack. So, you know, I've seen this used in a lot of different ways. I'm not saying it's breaking my mind, but of like the one-time uses we've looked over, I mean, the good ones are probably Guardian Spirit. Well, Guardian Spirit, Right of the Armor, Right of Wealth, right? Okay, so it's Right of the Dreadnought. All currently active units permanently gain 1 defense and 1 resistance. This one is also pretty good. You can use this before a big battle, and you can just make your dudes tanky. I mean, once we're starting to look at these one-time uses, the Imperium cost is going to start mattering less and less, because we're not really looking at the cost, we're looking at what they do, because it doesn't matter how cost efficient Right of the Dreadnought is. We're just looking at, can me win game using this, right? And yeah, I mean, permanently 1 defense and 1 resistance on a final battle can, yeah, sometimes win you the game. So that's the Materium tree. Materium tree is actually pretty good, I would say. Your empire will be stronger for having it, whereas like nature, order, and chaos are just kind of down there. The Materium Affinity tree is pretty good. This brings us to the Shadow Affinity tree. Now up here at 15 points, gain 150 knowledge per hero defeated in combat. Now this is 100 Imperium, and this is only 15 affinity requirement. Anyone who has any shadow resource can get this. Now, how early in the game do you want to get this is a question. How useful is it is also a question. Against some factions, let's say if you fight other players or AI or whatever early on, this can be pretty useful. If you farm city-states, this can be useful. Some people consider that exploity. Even if you kill a city-state, I've seen some wonders that spawn with heroes. One even spawned with 3 heroes in it. Over the course of a game for mere 100 Imperium, this is probably going to save you 2, 3, maybe even 4 turns on technology to get into some late game techs. I'm not saying this is going to be like some huge source of knowledge, but over the course of a whole game, you're probably going to be 2 to 4 turns ahead of another player in technology. Yeah, definitely better than Rite of Awakening at any rate. So this brings us to All Seeing. Free cities with a Whispering Stone assigned instantly provide you with vision. Free cities or vassals with a Whispering Stone assigned grant you 15 knowledge. This one is very good, but has a very annoying downside. You cannot assign a Whispering Stone to a city with maximum vassalage, meaning eventually, given enough time, if a city becomes your super vassal, you can't get the 15 knowledge from them anymore. However, there are some builds and there are some shenanigans you can do, especially combined with Court of Whispers, which allows you to assign Whispering Stones to other empires' vassals. This can be janked together to generate a good like 30, even sometimes 45 knowledge that otherwise you wouldn't get. I'm not saying this is like some crazy bonus that you should play around, but you know, you can do some funny things with it. Then there's Shadow Binding. And I should mention, if you have the Whispering Stone from here and here and here, that's 4 of them. If you are conquering players and putting 4 Whispering Stones, that is 60 knowledge, which would be a good chunk of knowledge. It's not permanent, but it is an early game thing. It's only 120 Imperium. It's like whatever. Magic Origin unit upkeep is reduced by 20%. For 150 Imperium, only at 60 Shadow Affinity. If you're ever doing anything like Umbral Mistresses, or if you're ever summoning down Magic Origin units, if you're trying to do any build like that, this can be quite impactful. If you're trying to do things like Phantasm Warrior rushes, this can allow you to afford it. It's just generally powerful. It does fall off as the game moves on and racial units start to replace everything. But, you know, it kind of comes in not too late into the game. Definitely comes into the game when you can still actually get them and be impacted. Gain the ability to assign Whispering Stones to other empires' vassals to gain their tribute. Gain +1 Whispering Stone. So, as you might imagine, it can be useful to kind of combo with All Seeing, but, you know, on its own, the majority of the time, city-states will be killed, or at the very least integrated, and in that situation, it kind of stops being really even that important, but it is fine in the right situation. Gain 200 mana and 200 knowledge upon completing conquest of a city. Ironically, the Shadow City conquest comes in at 120 affinity, whereas the Chaos one comes in at 160. So this one comes in a bit earlier in the game. And is population or instant mana and knowledge more powerful? It's probably the population overall, but you need to remember that they're both kind of mediocre. I mean, they're okay. How many cities are you going to conquer after getting stolen power? It really depends if you're killing other players or not. Let's say you killed 5. That's actually 1,000 knowledge, right? So that is impactful. So stolen power can be good if you play towards it, and it's not really impactful if you don't conquer other... Really, you need to conquer another player in the game, be it a human or an AI or something, whoever you're playing against, right? And if you do, stolen power can be pretty good. Death magic is, of course, almost required for every build, which is kind of jank, but it does allow a lot of builds to actually function and work. Death magic means you get 10 combat casting points per unit death or kill in combat. Now this impacts your units dead, and this impacts enemy units dead. 10 combat casting points is a lot, especially when you combine it with, say, something that could reduce the cost of casting spells. Death magic effectively reads, you now have unlimited magic in combat. You can now cast unlimited in combat. There are ways to overcome death magic, and I certainly have, with things like Mystic Potential, or just stacking a shitload of combat casting points, or things like that. But the fact is, for 1 point in death magic, and that's it, just 1 point in death magic, you get unlimited mana. Sorry, unlimited combat casting, right? So you don't need to craft 3 different trinkets with 20 combat casting. You don't need to go a specific tome to increase your combat casting points. You just put 1 point into it and you're done. You walk away. You're done with your life. You put your point in death magic. You're done. Unlimited combat casting. Walk away. Yeah, it's probably like overall like top 3 most powerful thing in the game. Some people would argue simply the most powerful thing from the Empire Affinity. So then we have your armies regenerate 10 hit points per turn in hostile domain. Now, this can be impactful if you're trying to get into an enemy city and it's just chain casting lightning on you or something like that. In that world, Dark Vigor can be impactful and pretty good. So, yeah. But it's kind of a very niche specific situation that needs to be happening. Your units gain universal camouflage in your domain, and your cities gain 4 vision range. Now we're kind of getting out of that like obtainable. Remember, these last 3 are pretty much unobtainable for a build that isn't hyper focusing in here. So once you hyper focus on Shadow, your units are invisible in your land, and your cities get vision range. This is generally kind of useless if you want to be honest. It's certainly funny, but it's pretty common that between 3 armies, there's going to be some hero who just RNG'd an item that reveals invisibility, right? Generally, that's pretty common to have. Even if it wasn't, it's not really that crazy of a benefit. The city vision range isn't really that amazing either. For 300 affinity, this isn't like something I would build for and love to take. Okay. This, of course, brings us to your heroes get experience 200% faster. That means if you get 100 experience, you get 300%, or say 300 experience. Really strong, actually, this one. Now, a lot of times, if you are playing sweaty and you are leveling hard, your Lord can already be level 20 by the time you could reasonably unlock this. However, this, even in that situation, would help your 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, etc. heroes also get to level 16 to get those giga buffs from being level 16. So Exalted by Shadows is just generally good. Just generally really, really good. I love this, actually. It's very powerful, very powerful. Immediately reveal the full world map. Your throne city gets infinite sensing range, and any army that you sense, you can see the numbers in the army and whose army it is. So, you can't see what's in the army, but, you know, Spying Shadows is really strong, but at 500 Imperium and late in the game, maybe not as impactful as you're thinking. Now, it can be really strong if you're trying to raid and pillage an enemy and you want to see where he's deploying, where can you safely raid. If you want to see where you're being attacked from, if you're going for a win and you want to see, what armies are where and where are they moving towards and where do I need to defend, it's pretty good. It's certainly, impactful. It's certainly an endgame thing that's going to do more than maybe Druidic Empire. Maybe sometimes less so. It really depends, but it's not really that amazing. Mostly Exalted by Shadows is like the end of the Shadow Tree. Like, this is the really good one. So that brings us to our items. We can get the Crypt Blade hero item. Crypt Blade, 22 damage. It counts as a melee, but not a base melee. Crypt Blade. Units killed with this weapon can Units killed with this weapon transform into a decaying zombie until the end of the battle. Now, it is a free action. It is a miscellaneous item. It can be pretty good, I will admit. There are a lot of reasons why this could be pretty strong. Certainly as a one-use thing that you get a Crypt Blade, I'm going to say it's not bad at all. Yeah, I mean, if you have the spare Imperium, just take it and then use your turn properly. Instantly gain 750 knowledge. Now, you might be thinking, Rite of Forbidden Knowledge, isn't that similar to Rite of Awakening? You would be correct, with the one issue that Rite of Awakening comes in way later at 300 affinity, and this comes in at 160 affinity. So, of course, Rite of Awakening is better as the game goes on. So let's say I had, 60 population throughout my empire, right? That would be 600 knowledge? Am I mathing that right? I had 50 empire population. If I had 50 population, no, it would be 1,000. No, what am I talking about? Yeah, it would be 1,000. I did math it wrong. My brain ain't braining right now. So, okay, Rite of Awakening in every realistic situation will give you way more knowledge than Rite of Forbidden Knowledge. But Rite of Forbidden Knowledge comes in a bit earlier in the game. It costs less Imperium. I would say they're about equal to each other in that they're not really that amazing, but they're kind of good at, like, tempoing out one spell that, like, you really just need this right now. You know what I mean? The last one is, all your heroes instantly gain 1 rank. This one, much like Rite of Enduring Duty, is pretty good. If you, like, if a hero is level 15, but there's a major battle and you just can't get a way to clear anything to level them up, and you just need to take the battle now, Rite of the Exalted is really, really good. Now, of course, the difference here is Rite of the Exalted goes to your heroes, which even if they die, you can respawn them, whereas Rite of Enduring Duty goes to units which die, and then they just stay dead, generally. Not all the time, though. So I would say Rite of the Exalted is a bit stronger there. This brings us to our last tree, the Astral tree, which I did go over in a previous video, so I'm not going to try to dwell on it too much. You're just going to hear amazing, amazing, amazing again. So first up, you get any Astral at all. You can get Surge Spellcasting. Casting a combat spell reduces the cost of other combat spells by 25% for 2 seconds. So, yes. This saves you a lot of everything. Basically, in other words, Surge Spellcasting reduces the mana cost and combat casting point cost of your spells after your first spell, and then you just chain cast for the entire rest of the combat. It is extremely powerful, and any build without at least 1 point in Astral is basically inting, because unless you have death magic, like if you're not trying to go death magic and you don't have Surge Spellcasting, you're gonna run out of mana in a battle in like 5 turns tops. Okay, so then up second, obtainable at a mere 40 affinity, is locking and shuffling research skills cost 50% less, which over the course of a game can add up. And then researching city structures costs 25% less gold and 25% less production to build. Well, the structures that you always build are the research ones, and you can get this decently early in the game to affect at least your first 3 main cities, and this does affect Scholars Guild, which is generally really expensive and hard to build, but oh wait, In comes adaptive research, which lets you do it. Crazy powerful, and only at 40 affinity. At 60 affinity, we have gained 20 combat casting points and world map casting points. World map casting points are really hard to get. They are very, very rare, and here we have 20 of them at 60 astral affinity. Once again, if you haven't put probably two points in astral affinity decently early on, you're kind of inting. That's just kind of how the balance is right now. So, astral inspiration, whenever a new research skill is researched, the knowledge cost of another random skill is reduced by 25%. This makes your knowledge worth more, whereas, you know, having more food makes food worth less. This means the more knowledge you have and the more you're researching, the more skills get their cost reduced, the more cheap your knowledge is, the better you can research. And a mere 100 affinity. Crazy strong. Newly summoned or recruited magic origin units get +1 rank. Now this can affect way more than you're thinking. Affects all magic origin units, all of them, summoned or recruited ones. Pretty powerful, because remember, each recruit rank is 10 health. So this means even those crap units you're summoning or recruiting gets 10 more health, and that's just the 10 health. That's not even including anything else. So I kind of downplayed this in my other video, but even this one, compared to some of these duds that you can see around here, like Wild Expansion, Astral Binding is not a dud. In fact, there's no skill here I don't think I wouldn't take. I would take every skill here. Okay. Philosopher Soldiers, I mentioned this in my other video, but let's go to it again. Gain knowledge whenever units gain rank. So you get 10, then 30, then 60, then 100, then 150 knowledge for getting a unit to legendary rank. Even a tier 1 unit. Even if all I do is recruit my units and then level them up off a spell or something. I don't know. Even if all I'm doing is recruiting tier 1 units and clearing out PvE and leveling them up that way. Even if all I'm... Yeah, it just... And maybe, you know, you could think of a way to make it synergize a little bit, perhaps. So this one is really good. Then this gets us to Research Posts grant 5 knowledge, Conduits grant 5 mana. So if I have 5 cities, and on average, all I had was 2 knowledge per city. I'm going to have way more, but let's say all I had was 2. This would still be worth 50 knowledge. If I have 3 knowledge posts on average per city, this is 75 knowledge. This is a lot of knowledge to just get for spending Imperium. It is 300 Imperium, but boy oh boy, that's a lot of returns we're seeing there. Now this is 200 knowledge, so these ones are going to start being way more expensive. Your Throne City gains 10 knowledge for each magic material your empire has access to. So let's say each of my 5 cities only had 5 magical materials throughout all of them, which is about average, right? That would be 50 knowledge. And this will get way better later on, as I'll show you. Knowledge. Like, look at all of these. There's not a single one of these I wouldn't take. I would take every single one of these, okay? The only thing limiting you is how much Imperium you can generate and how much Astral Affinity you can generate. It's crazy. So next one is units are restored to full hit points and regain 50% of their move points after using a teleporter if they have not yet regained any movement point this turn. So you can't regain movement points multiple times. Then teleporters grant 15 mana income. Not that amazing. Teleporters aren't exactly, at the very least for me, I don't use teleporters very often. If you start getting into the hyper late game, they can get more important, especially if being attacked by multiple players. Like if you have the win condition going, you can teleport between your cities and then move to defend your city afterwards. So teleportation mastery can actually be pretty impactful. Being able to teleport, then move and take a battle is kind of impactful, right? So teleportation mastery, I'm not sure I'd take it all the time, but you know, it's not bad. And then this one, an actual end node that can break the game. So which ones can break the game? We've got Martial Ancestry can be really good. Not you. Druidic Empire can sometimes be okay. Knightly Orders on Pyre Templars can break the game. Reign of Destruction's okay. I mean, it's not bad. Spying Shadows is okay. It's not bad. But here, spells can now be cast on the first turn of combat. Imagine all the implications of that. There's a lot. This is impactful. This is big. This is huge. This is large and in charge. Literally, you could literally find yourself in charge of the battle just because you cast it before your opponent did. So this brings us to the one-time uses. Instantly gain 1,000 mana. I've used this before because sometimes if you focus nothing in mana, you can actually find yourself running out of mana. I've definitely had that happen. Now, you might be saying, why don't you focus more on mana? Because if I do that, that means I'm not focusing on other things. So I could focus on mana and then not have to worry, or I could just focus on everything else, get a much more powerful empire, and if I run out of mana, I just go, oops, and click this button until later on I start generating more infinite mana again. Immediately summons an army of magic origin units with low maintenance at your throne city. It's a button. I've seen it clicked before. And then here, immediately conjure a defended magic material near each city in your empire. It takes a magic material and force spawns it on a tile near each of your cities. If you have 5 cities, that's 5 extra magic materials. Now these ones can also be any magic material, even the ones found underground. I got Fireforge stones, 2 of them in fact, off clicking this button once. It's pretty good. But wait, there's more. In addition to the permanent buffs you get from having the magic materials now in your city's domain, giving you the resources or whatever from the magic materials, you can now get the global buffs from having them when otherwise you might not get them at all. And you get a stack of high tier units defending them so you can quick mop them up and level up your heroes and units a little bit more. And wait, there's more. It now has synergy with some society traits or something you could take. But wait, you also have, remember, ingredient experimentation. This will give you, if you have 5 cities, 50 more knowledge permanently. So when we look at that, it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear to you. It's pretty clear to me. It's pretty clear to all of us how this be. So let's compare them then. Okay, let's go worst to best. Okay, so best. Astral, Shadow, and I always call it industrious. Materium, and then I would probably argue nature. Nature, order, chaos. So from best to worst, I would say Astral, and this should be pretty clear to any of you guys who just watched this video. Astral, Shadow, Materium, Nature, Order, Chaos. I would say this is best to worst. And it's like, there's like the problem is, there's like a very large gap here. Because Astral, Shadow, and Materium are just really good. In fact, I'd actually say there's like a big gap here as well. Where it's like Astral, big gap, Shadow, Materium, big gap, Nature, Order, Chaos. And because of that, you might start understanding why so many builds try to cheat in as much Astral Affinity as they can. Because it's just so important to have Astral Affinity. If the devs want any advice on how to balance this, you kind of need to make the first 4 points of other affinity trees worth going all the time. And you need to make it so that going all in on one affinity tree, other than Astral, is worth it. Because currently the only thing worth going all in on, for the most part, is Astral. And even then, Rainbow Affinity is just going to be dominant because it takes too long to get to the end affinity right now. So, there you go. If you want me to rank them, I don't know. Let's do like S+. I don't know, would these be S? I call it like S, A. I know you guys love your tier list, so let's just do it like a normal tier list. Even though it's kind of hard to gauge them, right? It's like B, C. You know what? I think I put chaos here, and then order goes down there. I think that's how I would do it. Yeah. So this might be more clear to you, but it also doesn't paint the best picture at any rate. So I would say this is probably the best way to look at the affinity trees. So there we go. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for enjoying this video. Make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment, blah, 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 blah. And as always, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. I hope you all learned something good. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.